All right, welcome back to another episode of the Heroes Veritas podcast. I'm your host, Tim Bass, and today I have a very special guest, Gavin McCort. We connected on Instagram super organically over Marine Corps veteran, I believe. We really connected on that. And then over the last, what do you say, year?
About a year, I say, yeah.
About a year. We have nerded out on guns, to politics, to religion, to fantasy, to video games. We found everything under the sun to talk about. So I know we're not going to have any shortage of things to talk about today. However, I do want to introduce you to the world, to the people that are on my following, and really dive into what we talked about originally, which is fitness, dietitian, nutrition, some of the faux pas things that piss us off within the industry, some of the things that are myths and fantasies within the industry, as well as going into kind of the history of how you got to that point. And then we'll get some tips from you, wrap it all up, make sure everybody knows where to find you. And then we'll go ahead and get the shindig kicked off. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. Awesome.
So like I said, Gavin McCort, Bachelor of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics, as well as recently, within the last month or so, you joined the Unrivaled Physiques. Was that coaching program? Is that a program, or is that?
It's a coaching group that's run by my friend Matt Rizzo.
Okay, so coaching group. So I would assume with Unrivaled Physiques, you're in the bodybuilding space with that one?
We started with bodybuilding, but we're kind of trying to transition more towards a larger demographic, just focusing more on like health and wellness and things like that. Because like, especially now with bodybuilding getting a really bad name with all the, people dying, people with having health issues, it's really hard to get people on board with bodybuilding as much. So more so just focusing on, improving health, weight loss, medical nutrition therapy, which is what I provide now.
Okay. And that's fair. I mean, bodybuilding in itself is a hard sport, regardless of the PR. It's a very, we've heard it 1,000 times. It's this isolated and selfish sport. You got to put a lot of time and energy into, prepping meals and things of that nature. And it puts a lot of havoc on the body, right?
And it's very niche. It's a very niche sport.
It's very niche. Yeah, it's very niche. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me within the bodybuilding space is, like you said, the deaths and the things like that. And I kind of want to dive into that today on this call a little bit, because I know you know the science behind, and we've talked about this before, the science behind how a person gets to the point where they're manipulating insulin and estrogen and increasing cholesterol and messing with their ketones and all the stuff behind that really people don't see. They're just like, oh, this guy put on muscle and now he's dead. And they don't really understand the nuances of, well, yeah, but he was manipulating things at a biological level that you really shouldn't be manipulating, or he went too hard, too fast, and you just couldn't keep up, things of that nature. And so we'll dive into that as well. So the reason that I really thought that it was critical to have you on is because of 3 reasons. One, you and I have a very good rapport, and we nerd out, like I said, on the science of things. And a lot of times, especially when I was like overweight and I was learning this stuff, there was this line that you would find yourself crossing, this intersection where the science overshot and missed the mark versus the culture. And what I mean by that is like these fad diets where they're like, oh, seed oils kill you, so go full carnivore, right? It's like, I mean, that's an option, right? Or it was like, yeah, put a skinny waist trainer on because the bodybuilders are doing it and you'll lose fat. And so there's these, what I would call myths that get kind of conflated with science, because somebody who has done well on stage or somebody who has done well in the personal training market speaks to it as if it's fact and science. And so people are just like, they don't know enough to ask questions, where you and I, we've peeled those onions many, many times. And I know you can speak to that. And that's kind of what I want to bring. It's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on. 2, you have a very practical approach to the lifestyle side of it. I know you're very capable of training for bodybuilding. You've done it yourself. You've helped many do it themselves or do it with you. But you're also very practical on the lifestyle things, like how to do the day-to-day, not like I need to get down to 6% body fat shredded with, 23 grams of water retention. And like you can do that, but you're also very good at breaking it down for people so that they're not feeling overwhelmed.
Yep.
So that was the second. And third, I just like having our conversations because they're always a blast.
Yep.
And anytime I find people like yourself where we can connect and talk at length about things, I always want to bring it back to the audience because people can feel that. So let's talk about the lifestyle things. What are like 1 to 2 things that really drive you nuts where people conflate bodybuilding methodology versus lifestyle methodology, for lack of a better term?
The big one is going to be structure. A lot of people think that you have to be overly regimented, 6 meals a day, and the big thing is I can't have these foods. Like they always see the bodybuilders doing, chicken, rice, broccoli, tilapia, asparagus, all this stuff. And they think that that's what you have to eat in order to get in shape. But you can get in shape doing that. But the main thing that's going to foster is a poor relationship with food and nutrition and nutrient deficiencies. And an average person does not have to go to extremes to get into good shape. The main thing you just have to do is adjust, lifestyle factors, help them understand portion sizes, help them to, understand that there's not necessarily good and bad foods, but it's all about, having a balanced diet. It's all about, you can have, if a food they enjoy that keeps them on track would be, if they want a couple Oreos a day, you can definitely factor those in and keep them on track. The main thing is the best diet is the one that you can adhere to long term. So it's all about, making little baby steps in their lifestyle choices that add up to big changes in the big picture. Another thing is they always see, bodybuilders doing a lot of cardio. And yeah, if you're trying to get to an extremely low body fat, yeah, cardio is definitely a good way to increase your caloric deficit. But they think they put more emphasis on the cardio more than they do the actual training and diet aspect. And, I find that gets a lot of people to that skinny fat look. They over diet, they over cardio, and they don't do enough resistance training. And then
Experientially, I know that's the case. That's actually what got me to becoming a personal trainer.
Mhm.
Was when I was 300 pounds, completely sedentary, no muscle mass whatsoever. I didn't know what to do. So I went back to my Marine Corps. You get up, you run every day, 10 miles, put a bunch of weight on your back and you just walk.
Yep.
That's all I knew. And I didn't do gym when I was in the Marine Corps. That wasn't something that I had access to, or even anybody in my close group within that was really into that. And, back in 2006, I don't believe that fitness was as popular. With
No.
the onset of social media and things like that, it really brought it out. But that's exactly what happened. I looked at myself in the mirror. I dropped 70 pounds in like 6 months because I was eating 800 calories a day and cardio 10 miles a day. And I was just anemic. I looked like I needed a sandwich, and I wanted to be a superhero. Like that was always my thing. I want to be broad shoulder, small waist,
Mhm.
look shredded. And I'm looking myself in the mirror and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not a fan. And it caused me to balloon back up to 270, then down to 200 and back and forth until I was like, you know what, F it. I'm done. I'm going to go learn this stuff for myself so that I can become functional and proper at this. I want to circle back on something you said, the structure side of it and the poor relationship with food.
Yep.
One of the things that really strikes a chord when you talk about that is this idea that that fat makes you, or fruit makes you fat.
Oh, don't get me started on fructose.
Yeah. So there's this huge part of the poor relationship. And in my experience, when I was doing personal training actively, um, one of the number one issues that I always found was this idea that in order to lose weight, in order to be functional, you had to demonize something that you like. And it was this kind of idea like fruit makes you fat, right? It's this idea that if there's some kind of quantifiable data without taking into context all the other outliers, then that is the reason that you're fat. And like sugar's a perfect example, right? If you look at the actual case studies, the actual clinical case studies of saccharides, both poly and monosaccharides, monosaccharides being within the fruit side of the house and polysaccharides being within more processed foods,
Mhm.
they found no evidence of higher levels of lipidity or fat development with those higher levels of sugar, provided that the caloric intake was restricted.
Bingo. Yeah, there's a lot of that came about. There's an MD named Dr. Fung. He had this insulin hypothesis that the reason why people get fat is because of elevated insulin levels, which, people don't understand that lipolysis and lipogenesis. So lipolysis being liberation of fat stores, and lipogenesis being the creation of new fat cells, or the filling of those fat cells. Those happen simultaneously. They're not something that happens necessarily, in isolation. You can liberate fat cells and fill fat cells at the same time. So people kept on thinking that, if you want to lose weight, you should limit insulin secretion. So people would go on these ketogenic diets. The problem is that fat is non-insulin mediated storage. So if you are eating in a caloric surplus and you're eating mostly fat, that doesn't need insulin to store. Whereas carbohydrates in excess, if they're not utilized properly, and the thing is, people don't understand, carbohydrates are stored in glycogen stores before they're stored in fat stores. If you have full glycogen stores, yes, then of course that some of that is going to be stored as fat, but you're always going to have a preferential storage of macronutrients before it'll go to a different form of storage. So like there's no place to necessarily store amino acids other than muscle tissue, which is why it's very hard to convert amino acids into anything that will store into fat, or at least efficiently. Whereas, carbohydrates stored as glycogen, and fat is going to be directly stored as fat. But of course, that's going to be in caloric excess.
Okay. So again, circling back, when you were talking about how Dr. Fung came from this hypothesis and this place where he proposed that insulin management was really what causes you to get fat, right? Anything that creates and generates insulin creates this thing of fat. And then you link that to keto diet, right? You link that to the ketogenic, where the general rule of thumb is what most people don't understand, and I can get into the details on this with you as well. With keto, you're effectively replacing your carbohydrate glycogen system with your insulin fat system, or non-insulin fat system.
Yep.
And you're running off a secondary fuel source that is harder for the body to break down.
Yep.
So to your point of the carbohydrate system being initially and ultimately stored within the glycogenic system, provided that you're not going into the surplus of your burning, right, of what you're actually eating and consuming as far as muscle energy development and production, carbohydrates would never make it to an insulin system. It's only when you're running in excess of carbohydrates where it doesn't know what to do with it that it then starts to go into insulin-based systems.
Yep. I mean,
do I understand that correctly?
So yeah. So basically, it's going to utilize insulin, but it's going to be more so for the purpose of glycogen storage, because people automatically think, oh, insulin, it stores, so they automatically assume, oh, it's going to store as fat. People don't understand that. So utilizing insulin, and there's an enzyme called glycogen synthase, which is what helps to produce glycogen for the purpose of storage. So those are going to be utilized for glycogen storage and formation, but people automatically think insulin fat. No, that's not the case, because if that were the case, then you would need insulin to store dietary fat, but that's not the case.
And wouldn't that also implicate that those who have insulin issues, hyperinsulation, insulin development, for instance, in certain diabetics, wouldn't that infer that they would always be fat? But actually with hyperinsulin, aren't they generally skinnier?
Yeah. So like a type 1 diabetic, somebody that's not producing insulin at all, they're they're typically very skinny. And especially if you're utilizing insulin properly, you're like, I've rarely seen a type 1 diabetic that's fat. They're always very in shape because they eat for their insulin. or they eat their diet and their insulin utilization or their usage is very intertwined. So they don't they're never going to overeat. Whereas if you're a type 2 diabetic, that's typically going to be that's going to be insulin resistance, which a lot of times is going to be from overweight, being obese, too much adipose tissue. Those are the people that are going to have issues utilizing insulin to bring down blood sugar.
So one of the things that you had mentioned is that most people have this kind of, especially with social media and the presence of fitness being touted for the everyday person,
Mhm.
right? You have the stage presence 6% body fat pictures that they use to say, hey, join my program, so on and so forth, but they're not holding that body fat percentage all year long.
Nope.
One of the things that you said you see a lot of is the structuring problem. And one thing that I really liked what you said is that it doesn't have to be that crazy, it just has to be manageable.
Yep.
And one of the things that I used to tell my clients was sustainable is successful. It does
100%.
not matter what you do, how good it is or how bad it is. If you cannot remain consistent with it, it doesn't matter. I recently had a conversation, just somebody mentioned that I used to be a personal trainer, and they were like, so my trainer's having me eat 3,600 calories. Now this person's 5'2". And I was like, your BMR, there's no way your BMR at 5'2" is even close to pushing you towards 3,500 unless you're trying to bulk at a serious level. But you're going to get so much fat. And I ran his numbers and he shouldn't have been out of the 2000s for bulking. Yep. He was at like 1,800 or something like that for his bulking. So going back to what you said about the structure and that manageability, that sustainability, what would you say to somebody who's maybe struggling with not knowing, I mean, other than hiring you as a coach, not knowing the line, how to discern that sustainable level versus just being half-assed, right? Because there is this line where it's like, okay, am I not sustaining it because I'm not good enough, right? Because there's that mental place going back to that relationship with food, going back to willpower, which I don't like that people put in regards to food, right? Like I don't have the willpower to well, that's because you're demonizing, right? It's a whole other thing. But there are some emotional and not physiological, neurological detriments that happen when you have that system where you think it's not sustainable because of me, rather it's not sustainable because it's not sustainable. If somebody's struggling with that line where how do I know it's not just me being a lazy fat piece of shit versus this isn't sustainable for me. Do you have any tips for them to kind of make that line without, hiring a coach?
Yeah. So I always tell people the bigger the change, the harder it's going to keep it. So the best way to be able to make those sustainable changes is to make little changes at a time. If you make a change that is so big that you can't keep up with it for a couple days, it's too big of a change. So one way I kind of differentiate with people is how stressful is it to make X change? So if like that change causes you to, become OCD, become anxious all the time, you're very stressed out, trying to keep up, then it's probably unsustainable. But if it's something, a little change, even it's just something as, okay, I'm going to drink, let's say somebody typically drinks maybe a liter of water. I feel like most people underdrink a lot. It's like, okay, let's add in a pint, add in 16.9 fluid ounces. We're going to do a liter and a half now. Okay, then you build up to, drinking, what you should be at for your body weight. It's kind of like, okay, maybe they're not eating any fruits and vegetables. Okay, let's add in one fruit and one vegetable a day. Okay, that's the week we could do that. Okay, maybe the next week. Okay, we add in 2, things like that. If they have an issue with overeating, okay, what's something that you don't eat a lot that's very high calorie? Okay, that's going to be much easier for you to necessarily eat less of because it's not something you typically eat a lot anyway. So just decreasing that portion, it may be very high calorie, maybe putting you over what your total daily energy requirements are. By decreasing that, okay, that's lowering calories that way. It's just making those baby steps that you're able to create habits from, and then you can turn those little steps into big steps because you're creating those habits to be able to facilitate those bigger steps.
Yeah. One thing that you said was add fruit. And I think, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. I think most people, when they see structuring and programming a diet or a nutrition set list, they immediately want to know what they're losing.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I do client programming, I pretty much keep them the same for 2 weeks while I develop a baseline. I just tell them to track it. Like,
Yeah.
just tell me what you're eating because I don't even know where to make adjustments. Because maybe I tell you you need to go straight to chicken and fish, and you eat fish never. Well, then adding fish is going to be stressful, like you said. So, can you speak a little bit to like people's ideas of restriction versus like facilitating a proper program and not just going immediately to demonization, immediately to removal, and start talking about sometimes it is important to add.
Yeah. So one thing I always ask, so whenever I do a questionnaire with somebody, I always go through, okay, your three macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats. What are sources of each one that you enjoy? That's the big thing I base every, dietary protocol around, is making sure that you are eating things that you enjoy or variations of them, so that you can maintain consistency. Because if someone gives you foods that are the exact opposite of the end of the spectrum of things that you enjoy, you're not going to stick to it. So if you include either things you enjoy or healthier versions of them, then that's automatically going to make that diet much more appealing. But to something that you said, if it's like a general nutrition client, somebody that's general population, they are not at a point where they can track food and not be, stressed, OCD about it, whatever. Like you said, I look at what they're eating. I tell them to track what they're track, as precisely as they are able to get, their calorie intake, their foods that they typically are eating, and weight shifts that's associated with that intake. And then we do that over the course of a week or two, get a baseline of where their caloric intake should be. And then based around their habitual food choices, we form a diet that's easy for them to follow, so that they're able to not only understand better food choices, because I'm not necessarily about what's good and what's bad. It's okay, this is okay, but this is better. So like, they may enjoy sweets. It's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with fruit. People always demonize sugar. Fruit is higher volume, high in fiber, high in micronutrients and things like that, high in antioxidants, very good for you. That can be something you can include to curb that craving, in fill in that sweet tooth. But it's going to not be something that's going to make you hungry later. It's going to fill you up a lot better, and that can help you stick to that diet a lot easier.
So you've mentioned this a couple times, which is around the OCD, the stress of trying to figure out what to eat, how to eat, when to eat. And I've actually had this question come to me probably twice in the last 3 weeks or so. It's like, I eat for outcome. Like, that's how my brain works. I'm very compartmentalized. So if I'm out having a beer and having pizza with some boys and just having a good time, I don't give two shits about my nutrition. I don't beat myself up about it. That was my sacrifice, my choice for that night. I enjoyed myself. The next day, I'll hit the gym. I'll get back to the water, the oats, the eggs. Like, I'll get back on it. What would you say to somebody who is experiencing that stress OCD as a tip to try and remove some of the stress of that? Like,
Well,
maybe like to rephrase it a different way. Is there a prioritization of calories versus macros versus calories, day versus week? Like, how would you kind of guide somebody on reducing that OCD stress about eating?
Okay, so usually I just focus on the big thing, which is going to be, of course, caloric intake. And, I look at things as like a weekly average most of the time. So people don't have to necessarily hit that exact number every single day. There's always going to be leeway. So because if you give them strict numbers, they're going to overanalyze everything. You give them a range, it allows them to hit that caloric goal, but they're not necessarily going to stress over every little morsel of food. It's kind of like I had a client today. She ate a little extra fat, but she was short on protein and carbs. I said, okay, if it makes it easier, okay, pull back on your carbs a little bit, and you could add that to your fat. That way you're able to, get your protein in, because a lot of protein is going to have some fat with it. So it allows you to hit your protein goal, which is what I prioritize more in the macronutrient spectrum of things. But you're not so worried about, okay, how am I going to do this macro Tetris and all this stuff? So I prioritize protein and calories, but calories and then protein is going to be the main thing. And then a lot of times I tell people, don't stress about eating at certain times. Let your meals follow your schedule. Don't let your schedule follow your meals. Don't base your entire day around this arbitrary meal timing
The
that
anabolic
you have
window.
in your head. Yeah. Oh gosh, don't even get me started on the anabolic window. I definitely want to talk about that a little bit later, because that
Yeah.
is something that people that's total mental masturbation right there.
Oh yeah. And if you look at fitness as a general rule, and we've talked about this in the past, like I would argue that about 90 to 95% of the things that people are told to focus on is mental masturbation.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually produce results. It isn't actually effective in developing programming or results.
Yeah.
And you said it in answering that question of like, I focus on caloric intake. As long as you're hitting that, everything else is manageable. I focus protein above all else because protein builds muscle. More muscle equals more metabolic rate, which means you'll drop weight faster. Very, very easy to do. But all the other stuff is so nonchalant. Um, One of the things that I wanted to talk about is kind of circling full back to the beginning of this conversation. You mentioned structuring so that you don't break your relationship with food.
Yep.
And I think that that's something that's very overlooked, especially when you look at the OCD stress level. Like I, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because this is something that I did when I was training. And I apologize if you guys can hear the outside. My landscapers are here. Of course, perfect timing.
Right.
So yeah, so hopefully the noise canceling mic is doing its job. So the thing that I used to struggle with my clients was balancing out. We have a goal that we want to hit, and the relationship with food. And one of the things that used to frustrate me was I would be in the gym with other trainers, listening to them talk to their clients. And I'm a big proponent. I'm going to give you respect. That's your client. I'm not going to step in. I don't like when people do it to me. I'm not going to do it to you. But
Yep.
some of the shit that these guys would say would drive me absolutely fucking nuts. Like absolutely nuts, because it literally would put into this place of they're creating these stress zombie monsters on, am I eating enough or not enough, or eating too much? And then they'd have mental breakdowns in front of the trainer, and the trainer's just like, well, you just got to do it if you want the results. And it's like, you don't even understand their initial relationship with food.
Yep.
Right? Maybe they're used to not having any food, and now you're telling them to eat 3,600 calories. They're like, I can't even stomach it without throwing up, or vice versa. Maybe they had an eating disorder at some point. So I know a lot of my listeners have gone through something similar, either like mentally or physically. While you speak, I'm going to mute my mics in case there's stuff on the outside you can hear. And can you speak to how you would recommend somebody getting around those kind of those eating disorders and broken relationships with food?
Okay, so I will talk about my background, because like you, I used to be overweight. When I was a freshman in high school, I was almost 300 pounds. Never lifted a weight in my life. And the problem was that my initial thing was, okay, I'm eating a lot now. Okay, in order to lose weight, I have to eat barely anything. So I starved myself. I initially thought, okay, if I'm eating 2,000 calories a day, I didn't understand metabolic rate. I didn't understand total daily energy requirements or anything like that. I thought if you're eating 2,000 calories, you should burn off 2,000 calories. And that's the problem is if you're coming to somebody that comes from a disordered eating mindset, then they will automatically go to extremes. And the problem with that is like you go from one extreme to the other, that's automatically going to create this cycle of, binge purge or, some form of restriction. They're going to rebound back to what they know. So like a fat person, you restrict them overly, they're going to eventually break and they're going to go back to that, the fat person mindset, the overeating. You go with somebody that was anorexic or bulimic, if you try to add way too many calories too soon, they're going to think they're going to get fat and they're going to automatically go back to what they know. So the best way to, get over these hurdles is to take everything where they're at and not thrust them into where they want to be. Because, obviously where you're at now is a complete opposite of where you want to be. So you have to look at things, in two different perspectives. It's like if you take where they're at and then you incrementally, make little changes over time, then that will eventually add up to what they are going to need to do to get to where they need to be. But if you go from 0 to 100, all you're going to do is crash and burn.
So I want to kind of rephrase what you said just to a realm of like what people can do. So 1 second, I'm going to let them pass. They were nowhere near the window, and while you were talking, while I was on mute, and as soon as I unmuted, they went right by the window with the leaf blower. So anyway, one of the things that I like giving is tangible and tactical tips to my listeners. Like I like whatever conversations we have that they're actual functional things that they can take out into the real world and implement right away. And one of the things you just said there was meet them where they're at. And I think people need to give this grace to themselves as well. Is be okay with where you're at. Become radically honest and ruthlessly honest with understanding who you are and where you're at and how you got there. And being okay with, I'm not where I want to be, because if you were where you want to be, you wouldn't even be having this conversation.
There you go.
So allow yourself, to Gavin's point, to be okay with where you're at. Set a point in the future, but don't try and be there now. Realize that there's an implementation process. And I believe the studies show that 2 pounds a week is the maximum healthy amount of weight you can lose. And that's if you're going super extreme like a bodybuilder. Beyond that, it becomes extremely unhealthy on a number of levels. So even if you're making half a pound or a pound of movement a week, up or down, depending on what you want to do, that's a massive amount. Because if you look at 52 weeks, if you're doing 52 weeks of work and you're losing 1 pound a week, you're losing 52 pounds in a year.
Yep.
That's an immense amount of weight. And there's so many different variables. So to Gavin's point, like, be okay with where you're at. Dream and put the vision and the goal in place, put it there, set it there, and give yourself the grace that it's not going to be perfect out the gate, because you don't even know the reasons you're doing what you're doing. Up to this point, you've been unintentional. It just is what it is. And you're just aware that it's not working, but you don't actually know why or how. So give yourself the grace to be where you're at and make incremental changes, sustainable changes that are successful in the long run to hit those goals. Does that kind of sum up what you were saying in a more like direct, tangible way?
Yeah. And also one thing is like, because a lot of these people, they look up to bodybuilders. Like a lot of people that get into fitness, they look up to their fitness icon, and they unintentionally end up micromanaging every little bit. They look at everything in the now. They look at everything in like, okay, as almost like an hour by hour, meal by meal basis. And that creates excess stress. Instead of, I tell people, it's healthier to look at things in a big picture perspective, because if you have a lot that you need to do, but you don't need to micromanage to get there, then look at everything from that big picture, from that top down perspective, instead of looking at every little nuance, because people don't realize you can get into good shape by just doing basic things. Like, people overemphasize meal timing, supplements, food selection, whereas and I credit Dr. Eric Helms on this. He created in his training and nutrition pyramid books that he came out with probably almost a decade ago. It's a hierarchy of things that you should focus on. The main thing is going to be the overarching thing is going to be lifestyle. So lifestyle choices. Then once you start focusing on little individual things, the highest thing should be calories, macronutrients, micronutrients. I believe it's food selection, food timing, and then the least important thing, which is the thing that people always end up focusing on the most, is supplements. Supplements are the least important thing you should focus on. But people are bombarded with ads all over social media, Instagram, whatever. Buy this supplement, get this look. But that's literally the least important thing. If people always focus on meal timing, they think, oh, I have to eat 6 meals a day. I have to eat every 2 to 3 hours. When if you could eat 3 meals a day, spread your protein out. As long as you're hitting your protein, your calorie goals, you'll have a very similar outcome. People think, oh, I have to eat these certain foods. Whereas, if I always use the 80-20 rule with people. It's like, okay, 80% whole micronutrient dense foods, 20%, foods that you can enjoy, they're discretionary calories. And that's what I tend to focus on. So you have to prioritize things that should actually be prioritized.
And I like the way that you looked at it from a priority standpoint was like, what are you good at right now?
Yeah.
Right. Like habits, calories, macros, micros, timing, supplements. That's the pyramid, right? Like, your habits for your lifestyle need to be sustainable. If they're not sustainable, that's where your energy goes. If you've got it to a point where like for me, gym is a day to day. I don't think about it. Everybody knows where I'm going to be. I'm going to be there tomorrow. I don't know what time because of my schedule, but I know I'll be there. It's non-negotiable. I'll be there. So I don't have to worry about, am I going to the gym? Now I get to worry about, what am I doing at the gym? Yep. So many people are so worried about what they're going to do at the gym, they haven't even figured out how to get there day to day. And that goes the same thing with diet and lifestyle and just in general programming. Focus on what you're bad at right now. If you get your habits down, great. Then look at your calories. Then you get your calories down, then look at your macros. Once you get your macros down, then look at your micros. Because if it's not consistent, like you were saying, it's not sustainable. It's not going to work. And the other thing too that I really liked about what you said there was supplements and timing is what most people focus on. And the reality is, and I think you know this, and I think this is what you're getting at, is stop trying to look for the shortcut. There's no magic pill. There's no magic advertisement, no magic pill, supplement, secret magic thing that's going to get you there. What's going to get you there is the habits, then the calories, then the macros, then the micros. And then if those are all in place, the fine tuning will be in timing and supplements, but very fine tuning and way down the line. Yep. So there is no magic pill. Just do what you can and make sure it's consistent and sustainable. Love it.
Yep.
All right. So we're coming up on 45 minutes. What I want to do is I want to make time that we wrap everything up, which we've done a pretty good job as we go. Not always the case because I'll chase people down the rabbit hole, which I really enjoy. But this has been pretty clear and concise. But you did want to talk about the anabolic window. And I definitely want to talk about the anabolic window because it is bro science 101 and it is the funniest shit to me. So I'm going to leave the floor for you on the anabolic window so you could just get it off your chest.
Yeah. Okay. So people always think, oh, I have to get in like my protein and my carbs or whatever, like right after my workout within 30 minutes or I'm not going to get my gains. People don't understand that muscle protein synthesis is not something that it's elevated a little bit and then just drops. It's something that's elevated over the course of between, depending on how well trained you are. It could be 1 day, it could be 3 days. So that's going to be, that time frame where, protein uptake, muscle protein synthesis, all that stuff is going to be elevated. I mean, one session, you could have it up to 3 days that you're going to be able to better take advantage of things that you eat. But people here's the reason why I am so against the immediately after. So when you are training, you're going to be in a more sympathetic nervous state. So that fight or flight, high adrenaline state, because when you're training hard, that's what's going to be elevated. People don't understand. So you have sympathetic nervous state and you have your parasympathetic nervous state. Parasympathetic nervous state is where you're going to be more relaxed, and that's where digestion, things like that, is going to take place. You're not digesting food as efficiently when you're in that sympathetic nervous state, because digestion is going to be slowed down. I always tell people, it's like, okay, if you're not hungry right when you finish your workout, go take a nap. Go do shopping. Go do something relaxing. Let those adrenaline levels go back down. Get back into that parasympathetic nervous state. Then you'll be better able to take advantage of that meal that you're about to take in. So, I mean, for me, heck, okay, I finished the gym at 7 o'clock. I haven't even had my post-workout meal. It's not something I'm prioritizing, because at the end of the day, I'm still getting in my calories. I'm still getting in the protein that I need, but I'm not stressing about getting in everything in, these little tiny increments, these little tiny windows, and just overly stressing everything.
I think that the sympathetic parasympathetic is super critical for people to understand as well, in my opinion. At a very high level, your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are literally going to control the chemicals and the enzymes that are leveraged within your body.
Yep.
So when you're in a sympathetic state, you're going to have higher cortisol levels, you're going to have higher adrenal levels, you're going to have lower serotonin, you're going to have all these systems on the back burner, because it's primed for fear-based systems, action-based systems, movement-based systems.
Yep.
If you are remaining in a parasympathetic state, and I just wanted to expand on this idea because this is where you and I have rapped about a number of times. If at the end of your workout, you are still in a parasympathetic state, you didn't do enough work.
Yep.
Bottom line, you did not push yourself. You did not activate the systems to actually create efficient caloric burn. You might have burned something, right? Walking is better than nothing. But if you're starving after, if your parasympathetic nervous system is still there, you're still relaxed, you don't feel tense, you didn't sweat a whole lot, the likelihood that you actually had an effective workout is extremely, extremely improbable.
Yep.
So reality is, and this is where I get upset when people are like, bro, anabolic window. And it's a funny meme, and I laugh at it, right? Like, he's going to lose his gains. Like, it's funny. But the reality is, if you're hungry right after your workout, you didn't get any gains. You didn't get into a sympathetic system. And if you didn't get into a sympathetic system, you didn't tear the muscle. If you didn't tear the muscle, no matter what you put in your body is not going to be uptake in a way that's going to be functional anyway.
Yep.
And going back to your other statement that I wanted to kind of highlight and point out for the listeners was, parasympathetic is where you're resting. Go take a nap. If you're not hungry right after, go take a nap. More muscle development, energy replenishment, and structural system functionality happens when you're sleeping, when you're resting, when your body is completely, the tearing and the breaking down and all this is in the gym. If you're doing it right and you get into the sympathetic nervous system, that is necessary as a catalyst, but all it does is it catalyzes the actual function when you're sleeping.
Yep.
So I just wanted to point that out, because we've talked about the anabolic window a number of times. We talked about one thing I want to ask and talk about too, because I know we've talked about this before, is, can you speak to the protein synthesis maxim? You can only have 30 grams per meal, because I have guys that I'm like, dude, like, how many meals can you get in a day? And they're trying to put 45, 50, 60 grams of protein into a single meal. And it's like 3 scoops of protein shake with no bonding on amino acids. There's no leucine. There's no. So can you speak to kind of that, like, at a high level of like protein synthesis?
Yeah, I mean, the main, a lot of the studies you'll see, they're going to utilize whey protein to see what's going to stimulate mTOR the most, and a lot of that's going to be based around leucine intake. But usually, it's going to be 30 to 40 grams of protein is going to that's going to max out muscle protein synthesis in a given in a given feeding. Now, it's like from what I've seen. Because I usually cite Alan Aragon for this. He's one of that guy's my boy. Anywhere between 3 and 6 feedings a day, spread evenly throughout the day, is going to typically maximize what you're going to need to get in to stimulate muscle protein synthesis across the day. So if you're eating like one big meal, you're probably not doing things as efficiently as you could. Could you get by with 3 meals? That depends. And it's like, what's your protein requirements? If you're a big guy and you're needing to get in like 250 grams of protein, well, I would probably say, okay, maybe do 4 meals or maybe even 5 meals. I mean, are you going to stimulate protein synthesis more by getting 50, 60 grams of protein in for the day? No, not necessarily. No, not really. But I mean, is it sustainable for you to get in 6 meals, 7 meals a day? No. So I would rather focus on just, getting in your protein, getting it spread throughout the day in a way that is easier for you to get in, and just kind of let the Tetris blocks fall as they will.
I'm on mute. With the protein synthesis side of the house, is there a difference between whey protein generated mTOR or catalyzing mTOR, however you would describe that,
Yep.
versus an animal fat protein source?
I mean, the main thing that you're going to see with whey protein versus something else is leucine content. Whey protein is going to be very high in leucine. It's also typically has a higher bioavailability. So the main, like the gold standard of bioavailability is going to be eggs. Those are going to have a score of 100. Whey protein is going to be a little bit higher than that. Beef protein maybe a little bit lower than that. So digestion, going through gastric emptying, so going from the stomach into the small intestines, it's going to be a little bit faster with whey protein. Do you have to have whey protein after your workout? No. As long as you're getting in enough protein and enough leucine to maximally stimulate mTOR in that meal, it doesn't matter if it's going to be from chicken, if it's from steak, if it's from whey protein, if it's from egg whites. Now, are certain sources more suited for a given meal than others? Yeah, because like if you have to get in a lot of meals for the day, it may be easier to have a lower fat protein source after your workout so that you can just go to the next meal once you get hungry again. Whereas if you eat something that's really high in fat, it's going to slow down digestion, and you're probably still going to be having secretion of glucose in your small intestines into your bloodstream. So you're probably not in that postprandial blood sugar state. Now, I don't focus as much on blood sugar, but if you have compounding blood sugar, that can be an issue if you're someone that's getting in a ton of food, which a lot of bodybuilders typically do.
Especially when they start manipulating insulin.
Oh, yes. And I've experimented with that. I can talk on that to some degree. If you're honestly, you're not trying to be a mass monster, if you don't have a reason, if you're not trying to be a mass monster, if you're not utilizing growth hormone, if you have no reason to manipulate insulin outside of your own endogenous insulin production, don't bother with it.
Yeah, I would agree. And most of the issues we talked about earlier, like the perception that bodybuilding equals death, a lot of that comes from forced induction of insulin and trying to get bigger faster than their body could naturally handle. And
Yep.
It puts a lot of pressure on blood pressure, liver, and kidney ketones. But also, a lot of people don't realize this: when you're using HGH or any of the anabolic steroids, your heart actually increases in size as well because
Yep.
it is muscle.
Yep.
And that's where the risk comes in.
And also on topping about heart enlargement. So a lot of bodybuilders in contest prep will utilize various fat burners. So clenbuterol, uh, T3, which is active thyroid hormone. Those things are naturally going to increase heart rate. So if you are doing day-to-day tasks with an elevated heart rate, so like let's say your normal heart rate is like 70, and you wake up and your resting heart rate is like 100, 120. So when you go to do your cardio, you're having a very high heart rate. That's going to cause remodeling of your heart because you're beating the heart faster. It's being used harder, and it's like with any other muscle. You utilize something very hard, there's going to be hypertrophy. And that's where you hear about like left ventricular hypertrophy. That's going to be something that causes a lot of issues for bodybuilders down the road. A lot of that is not, so it's part of it is going to be, they're utilizing steroids. Those things are going to increase red blood cell production. You're going to have higher hemoglobin, hematocrit, thickening of the blood, and stuff like that. That's going to increase blood pressure. Just being bigger, having more blood to pump around, that's going to cause an increase in blood pressure, stress on the heart. Certain compounds are going to, for instance, equipoise, for instance, can increase red blood cell production higher than some other anabolic steroids. That's going to, like I said, it's going to cause a thickening of the blood. That's going to cause an increase in blood pressure. That's going to cause stress on the heart, or some that are just naturally going to raise blood pressure more. A lot of your oral anabolic steroids, certain injectables like Trenbolone, which is basically injectable poison if used chronically. That's definitely something that should be used very briefly if you use it at all. But then you got things that are going to, increase water weight. So things that aromatize a lot, that's going to increase total body weight, total body mass. That's going to increase blood pressure there. Like I said, utilizing certain fat burners, they're going to increase heart rate. So all these things, sometimes depending on how much you use them, how hard you use them, how long you use them, it's almost like that perfect storm of things that if it can go wrong, it probably will. Murphy's Law comes into play quite often.
I think, I want to be respectful of your time. We're coming up on the hour here. One of the things that really stands out here, and one of the things that I would really encourage every single person who's looking into fitness, bodybuilding, steroids, whatever, find you an expert like Gavin, somebody who could, I mean, we talked at length at the science of things today. We dove into a couple of topics deeper than even we probably anticipated, trying to keep it high level. That is the surface of how the body works. You have to understand that the human body is an evolutionary machine that is biologically engineered to be extremely fine tuned. And it could be as meticulously fine tuned or as meticulously fucked off as you choose to want it to be. And if you have a bad coach, and I've experienced this, if you've had a bad coach, it can really mess you up long term, not just in that moment. It can mess you up long term. So I think the underlying lesson of everything I want you guys to see is, one, Gavin is an extremely intelligent individual who has experienced a large wealth of information around fitness and human biology. But two, if you're looking to do something, don't do it alone. There are people like Gavin out there who are looking to support you, help you, get you to the next level. It doesn't need to be as serious and crazy as I'm going to become a 320-pound mass open bodybuilder using steroids and all this other stuff. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be like one of my clients. Last time I programmed her fitness, we had her lose 35 pounds in 3 months. Her one stipulation was, I will not stop eating chocolate cake. And I said, nobody said you had to. She ate chocolate cake probably 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And I was completely fine with it. She lost 35 pounds in 3 months. And that was us just kind of tiptoeing around stuff because there was a lot of things we had to overcome. Going back to the conversation around food relationships and past experiences and traumas and things like that. And everybody told her there's no way. This is what I was talking about earlier, where we had, coaches come in and tell you I wouldn't do it that way or whatever. Why I won't ever. If somebody comes to me and says, well, my coach said this, you should go talk to your coach. Like, yep. I don't know your plan. I don't know what's going on. It does sound like it's off or on or whatever, but I don't know your system. I don't know your outcomes. I don't know what you look for. But people in that circle were telling me, not to me, talking to her, telling her they need to fire me. She needed to fire me because I'm giving her chocolate cake and there's no way it's going to happen. Meanwhile, she had already worked with them a couple times and she didn't drop a single pound with them. And with me, she dropped 8 pounds the first week, mostly
Yep.
water weight, obviously,
Yep.
you know, because we started manipulating the way sustainability was for her. So if you're out there and you're struggling with body weight, I posted a thing today. I don't know if you saw it, Gavin. I
That's
was
all.
so I put on a little bit of weight the last month or two. I went through depression. I stopped giving a shit because I was prioritizing heroes. I was prioritizing a lot of other stuff. And that's just how I work. My pattern is I get fucking hard on for fitness for 6, 7 months, and then I'm off for a month and I gain a lot of weight really quickly. And then
Hmm.
I'll jump back on. And I post pictures of myself on social media because a lot of people think that it's supposed to be easy and that consistency is easy. It's not. Life happens. You know, you got responsibilities, you got work, you have other priorities, you want to have fun, you have family, you have friends. Like, it's okay to not be stage ready all the fucking time. And it's okay to not be at your 100% all the time. But if you're mindful of it, like me, I'm 34 now, 34, I guess this year, 34. Everybody in my age group is telling me how tired they are, how much they hurt, how much they can't do what they used to do. Their joints hurt, their back hurts, they have headaches, they have this, they have that. And they're like, isn't it crazy being 30? And I'm like, I literally have no fucking idea what you're talking about.
Yep.
I don't have those problems. I don't have stomach issues. I don't have joint problems. I don't have back issues. When I'm lifting really heavy, which I have been lately, like I'm going to go see a massage therapist, a sports massage therapist tomorrow. I pulled this shoulder pulling 305 on a bench. I was cold. I didn't stretch. That was me. That wasn't because I'm old. Like, get yourself somebody who can help you get to that point. It doesn't have to be crazy, but if you're putting in the time and the energy, it can be functional. And
Hmm.
someone like Gavin, where you've just seen the surface of his knowledge, quite literally, because like I said, we've talked for about a year and we've spanned every conversation vertical that there is, and we never run out of stuff to talk about because we're extremely versed in the different areas and we can talk at the degree that we talk at. If you can find somebody that not only has the wealth of knowledge that Gavin has, but can break it down the way Gavin does, you'll be well on your way to a much better lifestyle, a much more functional weight, whether that's up or down, depending on what you need and your goals. And you'll literally have somebody to partner with, because I know Gavin, he'll partner with you. He's not going to just be like, here's a plan that I wrote up and just suck it up and do it there, buttercup, which I know a lot of coaches in the space do to systemize, which we've
No,
talked about.
heck, I freaking, I've had clients when I first started. They would a few of them texted me at like 2 or 3 in the morning, having a panic attack. I'm on the verge of binging. I'll answer. Like, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. Like, a lot of people, like once they leave the gym, is like with a lot of personal trainers, like then they're off limits. It's like, no, I I care about my clients. I want them to succeed. And for each person, that is going to, that's going to differ. It's like how much attention they need. If you need a lot of attention and like you need to get in touch at the wee hours of the morning, I'll answer. I always leave my ringer on as loud as I can.
So I think that to your point, that's the difference between a trainer and a coach.
Yeah.
They're not the same. And a lot of people conflate them. They think they're the same. They're not. A trainer is somebody to hold you accountable while you're there and yell at you for the hour that you pay them to yell at you. A coach is someone there to create sustainable and long-term adaptations to your program. So make sure you're getting a coach, not a trainer, unless you do just need a trainer because you have everything else dialed in. Well, one last thing before we close up. What is the best advice you've ever gotten?
Yeah, I got this from my dad. You're not as smart as you think you are. Always be willing to learn more. You're not a know-it-all, and sometimes it's okay to be able to reach out to other people if you are deficient in something in your knowledge. So, like one thing I did early on is I tried to talk to as many people as I could and pick the brains of every perspective, because the thing is, a lot of people, if they go reach out to somebody, it's somebody that's almost like their own echo chamber. It's like it's confirmation bias. I like being able to look at things from different perspectives so I can get a well-rounded view on what I'm trying to understand.
And I think that's important. And it's something that I've spoken to at length on my feed, which is stop putting yourself in echo chambers. And I think anecdotally, that's why you and I work very well, is because we're aligned, but we're not exact.
Yeah.
We've had discussions where I was like, I wouldn't do it that way. And you're like, well, that's okay. And we are able to have those discussion civilly without feeling disrespected or disrespecting. And I think that
Exactly.
that's sorely missing in a lot of conversations. To your point, why most people put themselves in echo chambers is because they want that confirmation bias. They want somebody to validate them rather than being curious for a true answer. They just want validation. It's very different. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and giving so much value as you always do. Do you have any exciting projects that you're working on right now that you want to let everybody know about?
I mean, so I recently partnered with my buddy Matt Rizzo with Unrivaled Physiques. So I'm the director of nutrition through that. So I'm not just doing contest prep. So contest prep, that of course that's what I started on, but I'm also able, as a registered dietitian, as a licensed dietitian, I'm able to help people with various nutrition related medical issues. So I've been doing, blood work consultations with people. I've been doing medical nutrition therapy consults with people. That's what I'm trying to focus on right now, is just helping that bigger audience. Of course, like, I still love working with athletes. That's a big passion of mine, but that's not, people always see clients that I post, they think that's all I work with. So I'm working to, I'm just trying to help as many people as I can. I mean, I do, as a dietitian, I actually do have a full-time job. I do work with a food service company, but I'm really trying to expand clientele right now.
Okay. So that's unrivaledphysiques.com, correct?
Correct.
And then I know you created a new feed for Unrivaled Physiques on Instagram,
Yes.
as well as
So
you have your own, right, for Instagram?
yeah, I have, it's Gavin_Unrivaled. There's Unrivaled Physiques on Instagram. That's the main page. I also have my personal page, which has a lot of my videos. I'm going to be transferring over to the new coaching page. It's Temple Builder Fitness, all one word, all lowercase.
We'll be sure to grab that and put it in the description for everybody. So whether you're listening on, one of the audio only platforms or you're watching on YouTube, we'll go ahead and get that in the description. So I'll collect that from you after this. Well, thank you again for the time. Thank you for all your knowledge.
Thank you.
I just wanted to bring you to the forefront of my audience. Again, I'm a holistic coach. That's what I care about. I want to change the world. I believe we're all a part of the history of the world by existing. So we get to choose hero or villain. I choose to be the hero. So I'm trying to just bring as many tool sets as possible. When one of the things that recently came to the foreground is that we're expanding heroes to be more holistic. It was previously men only, and your knowledge and expertise and your successes, not just with the male athletes, but also with the female athletes and the lifestyle clients, really spoke to me in bringing a lot of tool sets to our audience. So we'll get you on there, and we really hope to get you back on here. Maybe we can talk more in depth about, the steroids or the aromatization. I mean, I didn't want you to come on here feeling like you had to write a dissertation for everybody.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on a high level, but I know you're more than capable of doing that with the knowledge you have. So I would like to have you as a return guest here in the future, and we'll dive into some of these bigger topics.
Absolutely.
So thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, guys. Well, if you love what we were talking about, you want to go follow him, make sure to go out to unrivaledphysiques.com, check out Unrivaled Physiques on Instagram. We'll get Gavin's information all in the description. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. We'd love to hear from you guys, and we'll check you next time on the next episode of Heroes Veritas Podcast.
Your spirit.